Who we are TNI Career Counseling, an impact-focused certified global admissions advisory and test prep, founded by experienced and passionate individuals with top degrees in their respective fields. We covered 12 plus countries with 1,200 plus global universities for UG, Masters, MBA, and EMBA programs. We have serviced 1,000 plus students with a 99.9 satisfaction rate and have secured $7 million in scholarship. The higher education guidance covers a blend of mentorship expertise and technology using AI and ML. So we will run you through a video which will talk about our services and how we would be able to help you. So you're here, you can play that. Yeah, so that's a short video about our services and how we will be able to help you. Going back to the slide, um, yeah. So I will once again repeat if you might have missed the video. So we cover life coach mentoring and profile building. We help out with college applications, and we also help out with summer schools. We have test prep coaching like SAT, SCT, IELTS, TOEFL, GRE, GMAT, and APs. We also help out with extracurricular support like YCM and Trinity coaching. And we also assist with loan, visa, travel, and foreign exchange. So that's in brief about our services. Going ahead, here we have a little bit about our founders and directors and mentors. First, we have Mr. Dhaval Mehta, who is the founder and CEO. He has been an expert career coach for 17 plus years, and he is going to be our speaker today. He is an NICEC member and a Pearson certified career counselor. He has his certificate from in college advising from Columbia University. He has completed his UG from University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and Columbia University graduate. He has done his executive MBA from Cornell University, and currently he is the president of University of Michigan India Alumni Association. Next, we have Mr. Kevin Zanzani, who is the director and mentor. Completed his UG from University of Michigan and PG from UC Irvine, MBA from Marshall School of Business, And next, again, we have the director and mentor, Mr. Chirag Bhatt, who has completed his UG from IIT Chicago, his PG from Stanford University. So that's a little bit about our founders, directors, and mentors. Moving on, these are a list of mentors and advisors that we have across the globe from different career areas. I would basically say 50 plus career areas who have graduated from top universities and are experts in their respective fields. So you can see their names as well as their designation. And on this slide, we have our team from TCC. Apurv and Siam, that's me. We have Miss Joanne, we have Dave, we have Iria, and we have Adish as well. Yeah, going on. From here, I would ask Davulsar to take it up. And before that, I would like to read out our agenda. First would be an introduction on graduation and the way forward. And then we'll have careers in different fields. We'll cover masters versus MBA, and we will also cover stepwise country analysis for post-graduation. And on the fifth point, we have preparing for further studies and admissions. So, Dhaval I'd request you to take up the time. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Good to see everyone here. Thanks for taking the time to come in, and thank you, TCC team. Um, Let me, probably get to the next slide since they've almost gone through the agenda. Great. You're all in college. It's a great time to be in college now. Post COVID, things have opened up. I'm sure you'll all have been looking forward to meeting your friends, interacting with your faculty. And so I think it's definitely a great time for you now versus the last 2 years where it would have been erratic. You all have to get onto online classes, either be on campus or then you had to be back, home after 3 waves that we actually saw. So just going through this particular detail is that, what would you do in college, after you graduate? And then, considering, would you want to work or would you want to, look for further education? So this slide kind of tells you that if you take an internship, you have to focus on different areas in your internships while you're actually in college. Why is that so? Is that because it's going to help you build an exploration pathway, and I'll explain a bit more of that later. Of course, the way to link, to reach out to people is get on LinkedIn, get on, the other portals that you have today to connect with people, to get opportunities to explore. So whether you're doing engineering, whether you're doing commerce, whether you're in the arts, there's plenty opportunity for internships. They were earlier virtual. Now you also have physical internships. I would recommend that you do explore, do take things up, which is going to help you out while you're in college. Now that's something that also helps you because it exposes you to an area, but also because if you're looking at working after you finish college, it's going to help you, I would say, escalate or to basically get you to that journey of yours more faster, because sometimes you'll find a company which is more willing to take someone on board or take you on board if you actually have that understanding of a particular area. Full-time jobs, building your resumes, having mock sessions, right? So when you're in your third year or in your fourth year, this is something you must do. Networking with alumni from the school. If you have any opportunities, such opportunities, I would definitely ask you to do that. Also take up a couple of, Coursera courses. Wonderful to do all of this because it's going to help you upskill. So there are certain Coursera courses that, you might not have even probably thought of. And Coursera is not the only one, but you have Upgrad, you have, Udemy, you have just so many of them out there. Whatever it is that you would like, take up a couple of Coursera courses to build up on your skill set. I'll tell you really, when you go for internships, when you even go to the real world, some very basic things of how to run through a presentation, how to make a pitch, whatever it is that you're taking up, right? But these are some essential skills, right? Being able to communicate really well. There are some fabulous and fascinating courses out there, which I would recommend you to take. And it's going to only help you build up on that communication when you're going in for, a discussion on your either your career paths or either, why you want this opportunity and why do you want to work for a company. Then next, of course, that you could look at is also, your post-graduation. So what are your options post your bachelor's? Are you looking at doing a master's versus an MBA? When is the right time? All of these things need to be assessed, right? So I think the primary thing you need to assess is also what's going to be your area, right? What is it that you want to focus on? You need to find that fit for yourself. And that happens over a period of time. It happens through discussions with others in terms of what they're doing. It depends on your interest in a certain area. You have to develop that. And definitely doing internships, taking up, extra courses, talking to people, talking to mentors, getting support, and taking initiative yourself is what's going to help you find that area. So whether you're in engineering and you're probably doing civil engineering and you think, okay, I'm interested in transportation, then start exploring that area, right? And saying, okay, there's just so much more I could do, say, if it's civil engineering or computer science, whether it's, artificial intelligence, machine learning, whether it's to do with data science or analytics. Try and get some more of an idea of what goes behind those areas. And if that's something that's going to interest you, and then do something more, I would say, more, not just theoretical, but more practical, so that you understand that is this the career path that you want to follow? Because when, once you decide your master's and you start working towards it, then, that becomes more of your goal, to make it your career and then work in that area. So also figure out that, a master's degree in a certain area, is that going to give you, like, what are the options that it's going to open up for you, in terms of a career, right? And then, of course, when you're applying, you have to start shortlisting the country and the colleges that you want to apply to. Think about what's your budget, how much do you want to spend. Today, you actually get loans for, going for a master's or an MBA program, but you need to know the requirements for that. You need to know that, do I need a GRE, a good the TOEFL or an IELTS score? What are the things that are going to actually help me while I'm thinking of this process, right? So that's what we're going to discuss. And if you have any questions, put them in the box or in the chat, as Siam mentioned and as Iria did before. Would love to take up any of your questions that you have. And let's move to the next slide. So pretty much what I actually went through before this is, your strategy to secure and admit at a top university is being a leader, right? Be passionate, be a go-getter, explore, right? Meet people, identify, and contribute, right? That could be, festivals in your college, could be, so many other things that are happening. There's a club, participate, explore, important, upskilling yourself, consulting a mentor, and then figuring out what your goals are and, building a career map. Okay, going on to the next slide. These are just some of our TCC student leaders that we've actually seen cultivate, and we've worked with them in cultivating their resume, their career paths. So Kaustubh graduated out of, IIT Mumbai, and, with a BTech, and he started working at Snapdeal initially, then moved on to careers, Cars24. And his idea was that he was more focused on strategy. And then slowly, once he moved on from Cars24, so when he was at Cars24 is when we met. And then he moved towards going to, so he was more passionate about, working in the nonprofit as well. And that's where he decided that, Swasth was the, company or the foundation. He kind of knew people there. He started talking to them and he said, what is it that I can really provide? So he took that shift, went in there. What you can actually see, what he did at Cars24 was, work on operations management, improved company metrics, growth. It was growing rapidly as as a company, and he was able to play an important role. Um, then, when he started thinking of what do I want to do, is when we came up with an idea. And of course, since he had three, solid years of experience, we said we can look at, universities which would comply in terms of what he wanted to do after that was again work in strategy. He was more interested within Europe and the UK. And so we applied to a few schools within that area, and he picked HEC. It was quite an elaborate process. It takes about 3 months for you to strategize. Of course, give your GMAT. That's what he did. His first score was probably about 740, and then his second time he was a 760. But it takes time to really get to that stage, and so planning a year ahead is important. And making sure that you're sort of focused on working through this area. So it takes a good 6 to 8 months to really prepare yourself. Um, Again, with Punapa, what we see is that he was at Manipal, worked with Google for some time. He wasn't very clear about what all he wanted to do. But I think with one of the projects that he had with Google that allowed him to actually interview with them, he worked in Bangalore, with them, and then he was asked to go to move to Dublin, which he did, and then that's the time when he started looking at, I'm actually here now for 3.5, 4 years. It makes sense for me to look outside. And then we started looking at other universities to apply to, and that's where he got into the London School of Business, or the London Business School, and he decided to actually go there. So you have to really have a good sort of. So he didn't have a very high GPA, and I'll tell you that at Manipal, I think he had probably about a 7. But typically, having an 8 plus does help you. If you have a lower, CGPA, you can still, think about building it up, as you move along, and still get into good universities. Um, with Divya, again, she actually finished a BCom, was thinking, what else do I want to do within finance? And she wasn't very convinced of just doing CA, for instance, even though she had finished her foundation level. So she was more geared towards really working in consulting. That's what she took up. She kind of did an internship in ENY, and then we helped her with applying to universities for a master's in finance, and she got into Duke University and a couple of others, and then decided to go to Duke. So if you actually look at most of these, sort of student leaders, you see that they've actually done a lot of work at the undergraduate level, also a lot of community outreach, or working for the community, having, so like Divya worked with the blind school for almost a year or so, and then continuously was in touch with some of the students, etc. Punapa did a lot of work within Google with NGOs, where he was advising them on actually taking up sort of, I would say, how to actually spend that ad money which NGOs get. They get about $10,000, but many of them weren't actually using that. So, he had that area of confidence that he built for these NGO leaders. Kaustubh, on the other hand, actually worked with Swasth, which was, of course, a larger NGO. So if you see that, that's definitely a pattern that you'll see across all of them, that they've worked for the community, established that, and established themselves as leaders, not just in being good in academics or just taking up leadership, but it needs to be a more holistic profile. And then how do you really write that out in your application is very, very important. Okay, so moving on. This is just a list of possible master's degrees, whether you're in science, arts, and commerce. I do get a lot of questions of, if I'm in sciences, can I still move to commerce, and maybe can I take a degree in finance, or do I? So there's a lot of variation that's possible today. But it's just that in the masters, you can't really move from a commerce and say, okay, I want to go to aerospace engineering now, and then there's a whole lot of requirements. So it sort of varies from what you want to go into to where you want to be. But you have a lot of not just the degrees that were always around for a long time, but you have many new ones that have actually come up that are going to help you work through, and are sort of combined degrees in many ways. So whether you're looking at data analysis, whether you're looking at data science, or you're looking at, VFX and being, on the design front, or you're looking at urban landscape, or, product design. There's so many options. And even while you look at the art stream, whether you want to, do your economics, or behavioral economics, or education management, there's so many options today that you have available. Of course, you need to spend some time to understand these also while you're considering a further education. So I'll move to the next slide. Um, this is just giving you a little bit of a layout of some of the factors to consider in engineering versus business versus finance versus marketing and accounts. Of course, there's a whole lot more, but this is all we were really looking at covering for today. And so if you just look at, say, a job profile in engineering, you could look at transportation engineering, highway, facilities, design, aeronautics. There's so much more, right? So what we looked at is what's sort of the average, salary over here if you start versus if you're actually starting in the US or in Canada or, other countries outside, versus what are the popular certifications that you can look at within this area, versus what's really the future status. What are the upcoming areas like structural engineering, seismic evaluation, retrofit of structures. So there's a lot happening in every engineering field, right? So you need to keep up to date in terms of what's really the more upcoming areas, etc. So similarly in business, you see there's automation in finance, there's algorithm trading, behavioral finance, data science and sales, machine learning, blockchain. There's just so much that's really happening, which I'm sure obviously you've heard all these terms, but you need to spend time to understand them better, right? And so when you actually look at a business degree, you could still do a master's in management also, versus and which might not require you to really take time off, right? So if you want to, this is something that you could actually look at doing. Is a lot of specialization which is available today, which you probably didn't have, say, 10-15 years ago. So you can think about specializing, and there's nothing wrong with it if you kind of know, right? So many of them come back and say, is it okay for me to wait for 3 years and then go for an MBA, versus, is it okay if I just do a master's in a certain area? And really the answer is that it kind of depends on where you are. So, if you, suppose did BCom or a BMS for a year, and then you're like, I think that just working here is not going to cut it for me, and I just want to go to industry right away, then maybe think about what are your interest areas and try to choose. I tend to stay away from a general management at a master's level. I'd say specialize in something that's really going to interest you, because you can get employed sooner and faster, and you will feel good about that because you're specifically working in an area. That doesn't mean that you can't work on the other bits, but if you think you like finance, you like strategy, you want to be at a consulting place, or or you want to be an investment bank, you'll have to kind of figure these pieces out. And today you have a CFA, for instance, for finance, which allow you to kind of take finance at a level where you're doing three different and we cover that as we move along. So three different exams that you take. So I think you really need to think a little bit more about how you want to see yourself growing. But yes, after doing a master's in finance or accounts or marketing, for a year after you finish your 3 years, for instance, you can actually grow and then start working, and then consider if you really want to go for an MBA. Today, there are certain MBAs which are 2 years, and there are some which are also 1 year's programs. So there's a lot to consider as you move along, and depends where you go. The value of both these are fairly high, right? Whether it depends on where you are in your career stream or in your journey, and the value for these degrees is still fairly good. So I'll move on now from this slide, and these are just some top career fields. Like I spoke about, whether it's finance, it's corporate banking, investment banking, financial advisory, or as an auditor, you look at being a tax auditor, an external or an internal auditor. Sales and marketing also an area where a lot of them really believe in the product or the brand. And today there's a lot of product managers out there also, because that's what the buzz in the startup space is. So it's important to consider what careers or areas you really want to look at, and then accordingly try and look at what masters that you would really want to take as well, right? So it does help you when you think like that. um, and I think if you have any questions on this particularly, please put that again on the box. So moving on to the next slide. These are some more career areas, like whether you look at liberal arts, or you're looking at architecture, engineering, or law. Many of these you guys already know about, but just keep that in mind as you're thinking about your way forward for a master's or an MBA. So again, to the next slide. Great. So just summarizing what we went through is, for an MBA, what you're really going to get is business management skills, but you also get specializations because you have finance as a specialization, or technology, or strategy, or even logistics, or real estate, or healthcare. You have all of these options for MBA as well, right? And typically an MBA is 2 years, but there are few 1-year options as well. A 2 to 5 year experience is preferred depending on the kind of schools you're looking at. So maybe an NCR will look at someone who has more experience, right? Versus maybe a younger school would also say, fine, even if you have 2 or 3 years experience, I'm okay with it. So there are a number of those schools. Coming to us, maybe doing some of your own research, then having a discussion is something which would really help you, right, in taking this way forward. We always advise students to kind of do a bit more of your groundwork also, then come and have a discussion. That makes it easier, because you have a background. Then finance, consulting, operations, investment banking, a lot of these jobs, even private equity. So private equity is a little bit more on the buy side, but there are MBAs who can get in depending on what kind of work they've actually done before they went into an MBA. Again, base salaries depends, but today MBAs are getting paid a fairly good amount, starting at $100,000, going all the way till $200,000 as well, because they have sign-in bonuses as well, right? If you finish, say, a 3 years and then you finish a master's, if you do a 4 years and then go for your master's as well, at universities we've seen $100,000 as a start as well. I think this is a little bit more conservative amounts that we've put here, depending on the kind of universities that you're going to, also how good their placement cells are, what kind of jobs you're looking at getting, etc. Okay. Factors to consider while selecting a country. There are tons. We've just sort of highlighted a few of them here, and then put them by country so that you can see what is a value at a top 25 university in each country. And you can actually see this in general, that going to the USA, Canada, is fairly high, just generally, because you're also getting an option, especially if you're in STEM, to stay back for a longer period of time, because you get an extension if you are looking at STEM degrees in the US. In Canada, typically you're getting, if it's a 2-year course, you're getting 2 years or more. If it's less, 2 to 3 years is what you could look at in Canada, and you can get a PR also fairly easily, depending on the points that you have, after you finish your master's. So that's sort of attractive, but then of course there are factors in Canada to consider, that there's less number, or the population's a little bit lower. It also gets a little cold. So these are some of the things that you need to consider while you're making a choice also, in terms of a country. Singapore is relatively secure even now for a master's if you want to. Hong Kong had a little bit of issues, so many of them were not looking at it given this year, but the year after, we feel that there's going to be a comeback for degrees for both masters and an MBA. Australia, New Zealand, both opened up, also great locations to consider an MBA or a master's. So going ahead. So we just kind of narrowed this down for you, made it a little bit more easier to consider, is looking at India versus, so this is sort of arranged with increasing complexity, requirements, competitiveness, and costs. So going from an India to a Hong Kong, Singapore, to a UK, Canada, Australia, Europe, and then USA. So the cost may be increasing, right? But also the benefits and the ROI also does increase, is what we're actually seeing here. Okay, going ahead. So this is sort of the weightage that how universities across, say, the US, UK, Canada consider your application. So they look at your academics, then they look at your GRE, GMAT scores, then your essays, and then your letter of recommendation, and then your extracurriculars and community service. So it's kind of split across these four areas, and then your academics. If you go to the UK, it's a little bit more focused on your academics. These other factors are considered, but how you've actually done generally is also very important. So this is just giving you a sense. If you have any questions, again, you can put that on. Now, how competitive is the PG admission, to a top university? So what we can see here is, suppose if it's applying for masters for an international student, the seats could be anywhere between 150 to 300. Say you have 3,000 to 5,000 applicants from about 40 countries or 50 countries, and then you'll see about 500 admits, because they typically the ratio, and depending on the kind of school you're applying to, they'll actually see they know that the yield, or the number of students who will accept their admits would probably be at 40 or 50%, right? Depends what kind of school it is, and so they give you that number of admits. But if you look at overall, 200 250 admits for international students, and then 30 to 40 admits for Indian students, which is 10 to 15% of the total applications. And you actually we've seen a number of increase in the number of applications from the last year. It's almost gone up 15%, 15 to 20%. So that makes it even more competitive. Similarly, for the MBA, if you have 500 seats overall and you see about 5,000 applications, and they give you 700 admits, you still won't see more than 30 or 40, admits of Indian students, or maybe even 50. And then, we know that many of them will say, okay, this is great, I'm going to take this, unless I have, they won't give the admission to the same, kids across, because they know at some spots, at least when it comes to the MBA, of who they really want, in their program. So, and I'm looking at these being probably the top 20, 25, 30 MBA programs versus maybe some of the others. Some of the others might have a better, chance for you to be able to get in. But, MBAs have been, getting more difficult. Even some of the master's programs have been getting more difficult. Also scholarships, right? So the good news is, of course, scholarships, we've actually seen sort of an increase in, for masters and MBA students. We've actually seen scholarships being awarded now, which probably the last 2 years were sort of affected. We've actually seen a number of students get scholarships as well this year, where may it be 5,000, 10,000, or even we've seen 25, 30% scholarships being given out. In some cases, I've seen even 50% scholarships being given out. So scholarships are very possible. It depends on how you've built your profile for the application process. So 70% of the students that we have who go through this process get a scholarship, eventually. And so we've actually seen, that's what we work towards, is how do we actually make sure we build their application so that we can help them with the scholarship piece as well. So preparation overall for admissions is, this is just giving you a timeline that how much sooner from the application deadline do I need to actually start preparing and start giving all of this. And, we would say, start looking at giving your GREs, early as possible. Also, maybe if you're in the third year or you're in the fourth year, start thinking about that if you are thinking for a master's program to apply to. For an MBA, as I said, having experience for 2-3 years is going to be beneficial before applying to any one of them, because then you have a higher chance of an admit. But even then, you really have to position your application really well. It's very important of what are the factors that go into it. How do I position making an application? And that's another story itself, right? There's a lot of work that goes in, including, as I said, your community service, putting your academics strong, showing what your leadership skills are, your extracurriculars, having a good LOR, whether it's from your employer or from your professors, and then of course shortlisting the right schools, understanding how a school works, how the application process works is very important. And you can attend a lot of info sessions. People will tell you, and then you have to read between the lines also. And then you really have to see how others have done this. So talking to a lot of peers does help you But as I said, get some background before you come to talk to us. We're here to help. Moving on. This is just factors to consider while you are finalizing your college list. Is think about how colleges look at, what's the percentage of international students going there? What's sort of the undergraduate CGPA that they're looking at? What's the GRE, GMAT? Some colleges, so the ones who are not really asking for a GMAT, GRE, may not necessarily be as competitive. So you want to be a little bit wary about that, while you're looking at, some of them say, no, I think it's okay. But it's good to give a GRE or a GMAT. It definitely improves your shot at getting a scholarship, but also being recognized. Generally, research internship experience. Do they need it or not? What kind of an IELTS TOEFL score do they need? What's the geography? What sort of are the what's going to happen after I finish my master's here? What does it meet your career goals? Do they have research work if you want to continue? Is it going to give you a good positioning in the job market? All of these things are good to consider. Then, of course, the visa situation, what's happening in that country, and understand the costs overall, and then determine your chances. So this is what you need to look at. And moving on is your preparation is, check the entry requirements, deadlines, get your recommendations ahead of time, get your statement of purpose, other supplementary essays. It's an iterative process. It takes time to build up. You need to have a good resume. You need to highlight your extracurriculars, really talk about them, talk about the community work you've done, any research papers, especially when you're in engineering. It's good to show all of that. Talk about, talk, as I said, to your peer group, other alumni who have graduated from universities, and of course, come and talk to us, and we can help you out, and help you find that fit of university, give you more of an understanding of what all you can actually do, and help you build that roadmap, right? And then help you with the application process. So these are just some resume samples that you actually see, where you can see that they're talking about their education, their experience, they're talking about the leadership and involvement, and then, of course, providing additional information about themselves. That's how you typically want your resume to be, is that you need to highlight your education, think about, what are your strengths, and try to position them in your resume, because it's a good summary. You want someone to feel awed by it, initially, and then say, this is great, maybe I want to go and find out more details about everything that they did. Okay, so moving on. GMAT versus GRE. I think this is something that, many of them ask. Again, exams fairly similar in timing, except the GMAT's a little bit, quicker. The GRE is about 3 hours, 45 minutes. You cannot skip questions in the GMAT, it's comparatively. So I wouldn't say, it depends, like the GMAT might be easy for someone, it might be difficult, but, most of them have said the GRE does work better for them. But the only thing with the GRE is that there's an emphasis on vocabulary versus an emphasis in grammar in GMAT. So, the section, the way they're divided, again, you're actually going to see that what you actually have in the GMAT is the quant, the verbal, the integrated reasoning, and this is what you really need to look at. And the score range is, again, 200 to 800 for the GMAT, and the GRE is, out of a 340. A good score on the GRE would be about a 320. I would want to say that would be a good competitive score. Yes, if you end up getting a little bit less, it's okay. Depending on the type of program that you're applying to, they might have a certain sort of a number that you're looking at. But getting a 320 is going to help you even with your loan and many other things. Generally, like a scholarship, things of that sort. So again, going through both the test structure, the scoring system, I hope I've more or less explained this piece. And the analytical writing ability for the GMAT has 1 essay versus 2 essays in the GRE. The integrated reasoning, which is not applicable in the GRE, but for the GMAT has about 12 questions, 30 minutes. Quant section has 1 section versus 2 sections in the GRE, and then the verbal has 1 section, and then 2 sections in the GRE. There is no experimental section for the GMAT. Okay, good. moving on. This is something that I spoke about, the CFA. The CFA is for finance. If you're interested in finance particularly, there's a program called the Certified Financial Analyst Program. It's something you can finish within even 2 years. But you could take, like, say, the level 1 is actually across 4 times a year. The level 2 is twice in a year, and so is level 3. And so you can actually finish this within 2 years itself, but it is difficult also. But it's a great way to know if you really enjoy finance or not. And you can typically start this towards your last year of college, take the level 1, and then you can take the level 2 and the 3 after that when you're actually working, and then figure out, do I really need to do something in finance related after this, and think about a master's of finance or even an MBA. So moving on, the GMAT, GRE, TOEFL, IELTS exam dates, I think I've more or less gone through this. They take place throughout the year. You won't have trouble with getting an exam date unless you're looking at it too late. You should start preparing early on. There are many deadlines available if you start looking early on. College application deadlines, again, depends which country you're applying to. But I would say US, maybe by the 15th of January to 15th Feb each year. UK, March to July, for a fall intake. I'm looking at all of these are fall. And then, if you look at Canada, again, by the 15th to 15th Feb, you want to, try and make sure you get your applications in. Again, the same thing with Australia, March to July. Each university has their own application forms, and they also charge an application fee for it. You can get a waiver if you really don't have. There are certain documentation that they will need from you if you really look for a waiver, and you can get it. We've seen some students get it, and some of them we've actually helped with as well. So moving on. Now, coaching, when it comes to GMAT, GRE, so if you are someone who can kind of learn by themselves and pace themselves, then there's plenty of help available over there where you can actually get some of the material and then start preparing yourself. But it's just basically you need someone to help you with a strategy of how can you finish the sections on time, how can you score well, and that's about it, to be very honest. And so getting that coaching is really going to help you narrow that down. So I would recommend it. We've seen a lot of students go through this. For us, we've focused on making sure that average scores are very high, whether it's the GMAT or the GRE. So I would definitely ask you to consider this if you think you cannot manage it just by yourself. So moving on. So this is just giving you a sense of why. So, and before I go to this, maybe I can talk about the next steps. And that slide which says next steps. Yeah. So next steps is for you is you could possibly take an appointment with us. We can, help you in that appointment, understand where you are and help you with building that roadmap. And then post that, we can help you with your sign up for a test prep if that's something that you need help with. And the mentorship program in particular is so that we can connect you to the right mentors in a certain area, and also help you build this roadmap better, right, and stronger, and then assess it. And then the application guidance program, where whether it's for summer and you want to take up a course for summer, we can recommend that to you, or for your college applications to master's or an MBA program. We also have Young Changemakers, which is a community service program for a month and a half, which is a virtual program, but now it's also hybrid. So that's something that you can look at. So I hope that this session has been helpful to you all. And if there's anything else that you would like to know about, do post your questions. And thank you for joining us today. It's great to see all of you all. And do give us some feedback for the session, and reach out to Adesh here, Siam or Joanne, in case you have any questions or you'd like to know more about what we can do for you. And of course, if you fill up the form, you will actually have more details about, I think you get a 20% discount on the IC session. So definitely try and complete that feedback form. Thanks, everyone. Lovely to see everyone here.
Thank you everyone for joining in on the session. Please do fill the feedback form, and if you haven't registered before entering the session, do fill the registration form as well. Thank you. Have a nice day.